point. That's just a point. When you only have a point, it requires time t1 through t2 in order to have space in between. So that means that you have time present from now to later. It doesn't matter how big the space is, it's still time. Whether it's nanoseconds or minutes or whatever. So the first seconds of the Big Bang, it turned from this, T1, to T2, creates space. This is one-dimensional length. It goes up and creates another T1 to T2 space in between. So that's one dimension, 1D. Your height only, okay, right here. This is your height, here's the space, here's your dimension, and here's your time. Here's your length, same thing. From T1 to T2, it creates space, it creates a dimension, it creates a two-dimension with your height and your length. Now you need width, another space, you need another point, 2 points, not just one, in order to create space. So this is the third one, and this is your width right here. So you have one dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions of space now, because you have separated with it. You have created space with time, T1 to T2. Now, when you take away time, T2 and T1, then you take away space, and it takes you back to a 0 point of nothingness. So the Big Bang occurred here, again, right here, without time. It's simply a point without time, and without space, without volume, without a dimension. So here's the Big Bang, right here. If there's no volume here, because there's no time, there's no 2 points, there's no dimension, there's no volume of space, no space at all. There's no 1 dimension, not 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions of space. There's no explosion yet. So tell me, what caused the space? What caused time only to exist? You only had a point existing without a volume of space. If you don't have time, T1 to T2, you do not have motion between T1 and T2 because you do not have time. Therefore, you do not have space. You do not have a 1 dimension, a 2 dimension, a 3 dimension, because this occurs 3 times. T1, between your length, between your height, and between your width. Alright? So, if you don't have time, T1 and T2, you do not have space, you do not have a dimension, because here's your dimension, and here's your space. So if you take time away from T1 to T2, you take that away, you take away space, and you take away your dimension automatically. So what do you have left over automatically? You don't have no time, since time is between 2 different points, T1 and T2. You don't have that. You don't have no space between T1 and T2. And you don't have no dimension. You have no volume of space. You have no 3D. You have nothing. All you simply have in the beginning of time is a point. A point of what? There's nothing around it. You can't have nothing around it because there's no space, nothing. So now, if this is the Big Bang, here's where the problem arises. Here you have nothing here, only a point, no volume of space. You cannot have movement if there's no volume of space, because there's no time. Alright? From T1 to T2. So if there's no movement, there cannot be no movement here to here, or no movement from here to here either. Because this is T2, and this is T1. And if there's no movement either way, if you cannot go back and forth, up or down, or width, you do not have space. So why is it that the Big Bang occurred here, yet there's no space? Yet, you take away space, and supposedly you have this dense state over here. A dense state. You have this dense state over here. How could you possibly have a dense state over here? Without time, without volume. See, you don't have no space. How can you have this over here? The only way you can have a dense state over here, an infinite dense state, at that, infinite, the only way you can have that is if you have time already over here. T2 over here. Since this is T1 over here. So how can you have a dense state already pre-existing before the Big Bang, and an infinite dense state, supposedly, if you don't even have time already there? You don't have no space. Because the only way you can have an infinite dense state over here, heading that way, is if you have the space existing. And that means time existed between T1 and T2 already. So you can have a dense state here, an infinite dense state existing before this point of no volume. Because you cannot have energy. Energy moves. And if there's no space, this is T1, this is energy right here, right? It cannot move, or light, a photon. It cannot move if there's no space between here and here. How can it move if there's no space? How can this... So even energy has a beginning, because it depends on movement. Movement cannot occur from here, from T1, and here's your energy. This cannot occur from T1 to T2 and move. A photon needs to move, even though it doesn't have no volume. But it requires space in order to move. So that means that T1 to T2 needs to exist so that it could move, and it requires space. And space is a dimension of 1, T1 to T2, width, T1 to T2, space, and the third dimension, T1 and T2, and it requires 3 dimensions to create a volume of space. And supposedly this is where it all occurred, right here. Yet you have this dense state here, which is dense state implies volume of space. Density over here, density over here, right? A dense state, an infinite dense state, cannot exist because that density is a volume equals mass divided by volume.